Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to be back with you again. And of course, I have to admit, I'm still excited about some things that happened Friday and Saturday. Friday and Saturday, as Jews, we celebrated the biblical feast of Purim. Now, how many of you are familiar with the book of Esther? Okay, some of you. Good. Well, it all takes place during the book of Esther. And Purim is a great time because this is a time in which adults get to act like kids and get by with it. Because what we do is during the Feast of Purim, we come dressed as maybe one of four individuals. Maybe Haman, which nobody likes. Then you have Mordecai, Queen Esther, and the king. And what we do in the synagogue is we actually take the scroll of Esther, it's opened up, and it's read. Now, when you come into the synagogue, you have what we call a groger. It's a noise maker that you're going to spin, and it makes this noise. And yes, adults get to do this too, all right? So what happens is we open the scroll of Esther, and we start reading it. And when we come to a certain person's name, we either go boo and hiss and stomp our feet, or we go yay. All right? So every time we would hear the name Haman, everybody would go boo, hiss, stomp their feet. If we called the name Esther, Hadassah, or Mordecai, everybody would twirl their noise makers and go, yay! So it's a very loud time. A lot of fun. And invariably, I promise you, there's going to be those people that are going to get messed up. And they're going to go yay when they should go boo, or boo when they should go yay. And believe me, it's easy to do. Because as you're reading this scroll, sometimes it's like, boo, boo, yay, yay, boo. And invariably somebody gets messed up. And of course then everybody just breaks out even more laughter. But it's a time of celebration. And one of the things we do is we actually bake this pastry called Hamantaschen. Now I have to admit my wife makes the best Hamantaschen. And you can tell her I said so. But imagine the shortbread that's folded into a triangle, and in the inside you have maybe apricots or mangoes or figs or whatever fruit that you might like in there, and it's baked. It's almost like the Jewish fig Newton, except we don't limit it to figs. We make it out anything. And so it's a great time. But we're supposed to give those as gifts to our friends and family. It's one of the few biblical feasts where we're actually commanded to give gifts. And so, again, you gotta understand, in fact, I had Hamantaschen on the way here this morning, the last bit. So today, right now, my wife should be making some more. Let's look at this up here. Megillat Esther. Now, Megillat Esther, that is the scroll that we read for this festival. Now, being Jewish, I've got to ask questions. So one of the first questions I ask is, why do we call the scroll Esther? Esther wasn't her name. Her name was Hadassah, which means myrtle. Esther is a Persian name. So why do we call it the book of Esther? Why not call it the book of Hadassah? It'd make a lot more sense, right? Well, not really. There's a reason for it. Let's look at that word, Megillat Esther. The word Megillah means to reveal something, a revelation. The word Esther in Hebrew means hidden. It makes perfect sense now why we would call it hidden. So if we put those two words together, what it tells us is that this scroll is a revelation of things that are hidden. And we find it even with her name. Remember, this is one of 2 books of the Bible in which God's name is never mentioned. God is never mentioned in this book. He's hidden. And also, it kind of talks about the story because, well, there is a secret that Esther is hiding that comes out later on. So how many of you are actually familiar with the book of Esther? Yes, no, don't know this, no wrong answer. Okay, I'm going to give you, let's advance. I'm going to give you, instead of the cliff notes, I'm going to give you the Shmuley notes of the story to kind of break it down. So what happens is the temple had been destroyed 50 years before this, and we are in exile. It's really our first exile. And we're in Persia, which today you would call Iran, and there was this king. And the king, well, he was a partier. And when I say a partier, he threw a 6-month party. Literally, 6-month celebration. But at the end of that 6 months, he threw another party for a week because he had 127 provinces. He had a huge area of land that he controlled, and he had all these, I guess, regents or people that was under him. So he threw this party for them. And in the midst of the party, he wanted his wife, which was supposed to have been very beautiful. Her name was Vashti. He wanted her to come out wearing the crown. Now, there's a lot of debate as to what that means with she wore a crown. Some think that's all she wore. Whatever reason, she did not want to do this. She refused. You don't refuse the king. So what happened? He got rid of her. Well, now they decided, hey, she needs to be replaced. So they decided to go out through all the provinces and get the most beautiful women to come, and they had a beauty pageant. Esther, or Hadassah, was one of those women. She didn't ask to be in this pageant. She just was forced to be in this pageant. Well, Esther, if you look at her, well, you can see, well, she was a hottie. And she caught the attention of the king. And he added her to part of his harem. Now, later on, she's going to become the queen. She didn't ask to be that either. But during this time, you had this advisor, his chief advisor, whose name was Haman. Boo! Haman was not a good man. And he decides he's going to get rid of us. He's making this decree because there was this man by the name of Mordecai, this Jew, that refused to bow down when he walked by. Because according to the law of the land, if Haman was to go through there, the people were supposed to bow in reverence. And Mordecai wouldn't. I'm not bowing for any man. He didn't do it. Well, this ticked Haman off. So he's got to get rid of Haman, or get rid of Mordecai. But he can't just get rid of Mordecai. So he devises this plan to get rid of all Jews. Mordecai overheard a plan, wound up saving the king's life. The king was excited, but he wasn't rewarded exactly at that moment. A little bit later on in the story, you have Esther. Now, Mordecai told Esther, don't tell them that you're a Jew. Don't let the king know you're a Jew. Now, Mordecai, he had no problem with everybody knowing, hey, I'm a Jew. Just don't tell them that you are. But then at a certain point, he tells Esther, look, they want to annihilate us. You have got to go talk to the king now. She didn't really want to. because you didn't go to the king unless you were invited, because if you did, you might lose your head. So she told the people to fast for her for 3 days, and she fasted. And then what happened? Well, she finally talks to the king, and now she's going to liberate the Jews. But that still brings up an interesting question. Why do we call this festival Purim? That doesn't make sense to me. Purim actually is part of a Persian word too, and it means lots, like dice. And it refers to the lots that Haman cast to decide what day and what month he was going to annihilate us. Now, does that make sense to you that we're going to celebrate and call this celebration lots? Because that was what was used to try to annihilate us. No, that just doesn't make sense. Until I put that word back into Hebrew. When I put that word into Hebrew, it has a double entendre. Yes, it can mean lots, but in Hebrew, it means to annul, to cancel. And what is this story about? It's about how Queen Esther annulled, how she canceled that decree that was made to annihilate us, all in one day. So that's why we call it the Feast of Purim. Not because of the lots. Yeah, it reminds us of those lots, but it also has the double entendre of referring to how it was canceled. Okay, let's look real quick at some of these main characters. The first two that we really want to pay attention to, Mordecai. Mordecai was a Jewish man from the tribe of Benjamin, the son of Kish. Now, I know everybody loves genealogies, right? And you hear so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, big deal. Oh, it is a big deal. A very big deal, especially in this story. Because here, the genealogy is of utmost importance. Because if you look, the next one is a man by the name of Haman. Boo! In fact, we like to take the chalk and write his name on our shoes so we can stamp his name out. He was an Agagite. In other words, he's a descendant of King Agag. Now let's put this into focus now. Let's go back to the time of King Saul. Remember, scripturally, King Saul was supposed to annihilate all of the Amalekites, even their animals. But he didn't do it all. He disobeyed God. He allowed one guy, King Agag, to survive, at least for a little while, until Samuel came and chopped him up. But before that happened, Agag was able to procreate. So he continued that line. Haman is off that line. And if you go back and look, King Agag, who was his nemesis? It was King Saul, a Benjamite, son of Kish. It's the story all over again. And that's why in Jewish thought, we don't look at time as being linear. We look at time as being cyclical. In other words, it comes back again. And this is a very good example. And if you look in Scripture, you'll find that lots of times throughout Scripture, how things come right back again. And there's always for a purpose, for a meaning. So those two guys are very important because there's a story going on within the story. But then you have Esther, whose name is Hadassah, which means myrtle. But in Esther means hidden. Now, she was an orphan. Her parents died. And so now her first cousin, Mordecai, is going to raise her. In fact, he adopts her as a daughter. So she understands having a hard life. And then you have King Ahasuerus. who was the king of Persia, the partier. So now we have our main characters. Now there are some others in there like Vashti. Vashti was the queen that, well, she had a very minor part. She refused to come out to the party and they kill her. So no, oddly enough, very few people want to come out dressed as Vashti. All right, advance. If we look, though, in this story, there's several life lessons that we can learn, which I think is very valuable for us today. Number one is you too have a unique life mission. Don't ever think that your life doesn't matter or that you don't have a purpose or a reason. You're very unique, and you have a mission that only you can fulfill. No one else can fulfill it, only you. And you may think it's very minor, but that's not really true. That's what we're going to see in history. Sometimes God wants you to be there at a certain time, at a certain place, for a certain reason. Sometimes you don't understand that. I'll give you a quick example. In the book of 1 Samuel, in chapter 9, you have the story of Saul, who later becomes king. But on this particular day, you have Saul, and there's a bunch of donkeys that are missing. His father's donkeys are missing. And so the father sends Saul and an attendant to go find the donkeys. And of course, I'm sure Saul didn't particularly want to go on this mission to find donkeys. But he goes through, and they can't find them. They go one place to another place to another place. And finally, the attendant says, hey, there's a seer over here, a prophet by the name of Samuel. Let's go talk to him. See what he says. They go there, and of course, when Shmuel sees Saul, he goes, oh, okay, come here. And he anoints him right then, right there to be king. Right time, right place. Saul had no idea what was going to take place, but now he's anointed now to be king. Again, right time, right place. But let's go back centuries later. Let's go back to 1948, at the birth of the state of Israel. Israel wants to become a nation. The British mandate is about to end. Israel's faced with a problem. We either become a nation and defend ourselves, or we don't and we defend ourselves. Either way, we're about to be attacked. So if we're going to be attacked, let's get attacked and create our nation. Nobody wants to help them. In fact, even the United States didn't want to help at this point. Now, there was a man, the president was a man by the name of Harry S. Truman. And Harry S. Truman, he was a Bible scholar, very knowledgeable about Scripture. But during this time, he was just kind of complacent. He was neutral in the whole deal. Well, there was a man that he had become friends with back during the war. Because Harry S. Truman served in the war, and he served with a man by the name of Eddie Jacobson. Anybody ever hear that name, Eddie Jacobson? In history. Eddie Jacobson was a Jewish man, and understand that in this time of history, even here in the United States, being Jewish was not very popular. But Harry S. Truman actually befriended Jacobson. They served together in the military, and after the war was over, they kept their friendship alive. They even opened up a men's clothing store for a while. But, well, the economy wasn't great and the business failed. But they remained friends. A little bit later now, Truman becomes president. Now, Eddie Jacobson, he doesn't try to take advantage of the fact that he's friends with the president. The rabbis, some of the Zionists was trying to talk to Harry S. Truman to get Truman to help the Jewish people in recreating the state of Israel. But Truman didn't want to hear any of it. In fact, he said, I don't want to hear anything else from any Zionist, from any rabbi, forget it. But then the rabbis contacted Eddie Jacobson. They said, you need to help. You need to help now. Eddie called Truman up to go see him. When he came to the White House to see Truman, the Secret Service tried to keep him out, but Truman said, no, this is my friend. We fought together in the war. He's a friend. He was a business partner. No, I can't turn him away. So Jacobson comes in. He sits down in Truman's office, and he starts to cry. Truman says, "What you crying about?" Jacobson looks up and he sees on Truman's desk this horse with a man riding on it. He said, "Who is this?" Truman says, "This is Andrew Jackson." Jacobson, "So he's important to you?" He said, "Yes, he's my hero. He has influenced my life greatly." He said, "Harry, I too have a hero. He's an old Jewish man, and he's come all this way to talk with you. His name is Chaim Weizmann. Harry, this is not like you. Talk to him." Truman said, okay, because Truman said he couldn't deny his friend's request. So he talked to Chaim Weizmann. And as a result, the United States stood behind Israel. 11 minutes after Israel became a nation, Harry S. Truman sent a telegram to David Ben-Gurion, the prime minister. He said the only regret he had is that it took him 11 minutes to send the telegraph. As a result, the United States economy started to bust open, and we became very prosperous as a result. But what would have happened if Eddie Jacobson had remained silent? What would have happened if he had not went and talked with Harry S. Truman? In many ways, it was kind of a similar situation to Esther. Let's jump forward again now to the year 1973, October 6th, 1973. The Arabs were surrounding Israel to blow us off the face of the earth. It was called the Yom Kippur War. They launched it on Yom Kippur, knowing that on Yom Kippur we wouldn't fight. They forgot one important detail: sundown. When the sun set, it wasn't Yom Kippur anymore, and Israel comes out with a vengeance. But they started running out of supplies and needed some more help. Golda Meir was the prime minister. She called Nixon and asked for assistance. If you go back in the history of this time, Nixon went against everybody in the government. Nobody wanted to help him. Even Henry Kissinger, a self-hating Jew, said, "Let the Israelis bleed." But Nixon didn't do it. In fact, he got mad at Kissinger because Kissinger delayed some of it. He said, "I want anything that can fly to fly and deliver supplies." They ran 567 missions. And with those 567 missions, they delivered 22,000 tons of supplies to Israel. They then sent ships, which brought another 90,000 tons of equipment to Israel. At that point, the United States helped to save Israel. But why didn't Nixon do it? Remember, we said that he went against everybody in the government. Why did he do it? It was because of his mother. His mother had told him when he was a young child that one day he would be in a position to help Israel, and he needed to do so. He made a promise to her, and as a result of that, when Golda Meir called, he remembered that promise that he made to his mother. And as a result, he sent all the materials. Now, everybody thinks that Nixon was the one who saved Israel that day. Not me. To me, the hero was his mother. Because if his mother had not instilled that in his mind, he never would have done it. And that's why I say with this, don't think for one moment that you don't have a mission or a purpose. We don't know if his mother, Nixon's mother, was alive at the time that happened. In all probability, she probably wasn't. She might not have lived long enough to see her mission, her purpose, come to fruition. And it really doesn't matter whether or not we see our purpose or mission come to fruition. What matters is that God knows. And to me, I can imagine what it must be like for her to go stand before the King of Kings and him saying, because you made that comment to this young man, you saved Israel. Oh, wouldn't that be a tremendous blessing to hear from the King of Kings? But here she was, a mother, housewife. She probably didn't think that she had any purpose or meaning, but she did. So don't ever think that you don't have a purpose or a mission. We each have something individual. All right, and if you look there in the quotation coming from the book of Esther, Mordecai actually tells Esther, you can't remain silent right now. Who knows, it might be that you were chosen to be queen just for this moment, just to save the Jewish people. Advance, please. Let's look at another one. We say, look for God's hidden hand. Now, we may feel that God is not there. In fact, the Jewish people at the time, during the time of Esther, had felt that God had turned their back on them. Here they were, they've been kicked out of the land of Israel. They're under a foreign power, and now a decree has been sent out that on this day they're going to annihilate every Jew in 127 provinces. An area going from Ethiopia, it's a large area, very large area. We wondered, has God forgotten us? This would have been our first Holocaust. It would have been greater than the one that we experienced later on in history. Nowhere in the book of Esther is God's name mentioned, but that doesn't mean he's not there. He's hidden. Now, stop and think about it. Was it just a coincidence that there was this evil man by the name of Haman who happened to be the descendant of King Agag, who wants to annihilate the Jews? And was it just by coincidence that his enemy was a Jewish man, a Benjamite, the son of Kish, just like the original one? And was it just by coincidence that this Jewish girl, Hadassah, was chosen and later on became queen? Was it just by accident that Mordecai was just happened to be at a certain place at a certain time to hear this conspiracy that was going to kill the king? And he went and told the king? Was it just coincidence that the gallows that were made to hang Mordecai was used to hang Haman and his sons? No, we don't believe in coincidences. It was God's hand at work. We just didn't always recognize it. So even in this situation that we have today with this pandemic, people are looking around going, where's God? He's still there. He hasn't left. We just don't see the big picture. When we had the Holocaust, Jews said, where's God? We're supposed to be the apple of his eye. Is this how he treats the apple of his eye? Where are you? We kept expecting him to do something. But as a result of that Holocaust, what happened? Israel was reborn as a nation. Now, I hate the fact that 6 million of us went to death. But there's always a purpose. We know that God's hand is there working. We just don't always recognize it. So right now, even with all this, we just have to ask, God, show us your hand. Show us what you're doing in the background. And just have faith in knowing that he's active. Advance. I like this one. This one's called Master the Art of Silence. There are times that we need to be quiet. And there's a time that, well, we need to speak out. Now, I love on Friday night, on Shabbat in the Jewish home, every Friday night we celebrate Shabbat. And during the Shabbat celebration, the Sabbath meal, one of the things we do is, we'll go to the sink and we wash our hands. And once you wash your hands, you got to keep quiet until the host actually says the blessing over the bread, and then you can talk. So everybody, they go wash their hands, and now they sit down at the table, and it's quiet. Mothers love it. Of course, Dad, what we do, we kind of delay it a little bit, make the silence last a little bit longer. And then we'll say the blessing, and then everybody can eat, and we talk. But I want you to stop and think. How many relationships have been destroyed? How many friendships have been destroyed because we opened our mouth and said something we shouldn't? Or how many times have we been too excited and we revealed some things about ourselves that, well, we should have kept quiet? Now, today with social media, that's easy to do. In fact, sometimes I'll get on it and look at stuff and I'll go, why? Why did you say that? Of course, I have to admit, sometimes I'm going, who cares? But sometimes it can be dangerous. My wife's uncle decided to go to Canada for a couple of weeks. What does he do? He gets on Facebook and says, we're going to Canada for 2 weeks. And I'm going, why? Because what happened? He just told everybody that his house was vacant. And guess what happened? He got broke into. People came in, they stole a bunch of his possessions. He should have kept his mouth shut. That was information that did not need to go out. Now, he could have, after he came back, said, oh, by the way, we were in Canada for 2 weeks. Here's our pictures. Okay, that's cool. But don't tell them when you're going. But too often we do that. Too often we get so excited about what's going on that we share information, even intimate details about ourselves, that we don't need to. And that can be dangerous. Or we get excited and we share something that was told to us in confidence, and now it ruins somebody's life. So there's a time to be silent. Now, if you notice, there was also a time where Mordecai then told Esther what? You can't keep quiet now. So now there's a time to be quiet, and then there's a time what? To speak out. Eddie Jacobson was quiet until it came to a certain time, and then he spoke out. Esther was quiet about her heritage until a certain time, and she spoke out. There's times that we need to do the same thing. Stand up for what we believe in. Share what we believe. And I'll tell you a secret as a Jew. I was taught in the synagogue that if we can intimidate you, you'll leave us alone. And guess what? It works. But I was also told something else. If you cannot stand up for what you believe, then number one, you don't really believe in it. And number two, don't expect me to. If you cannot stand up for what you believe, you really don't believe in it, and don't expect me to. Don't expect others to. All right, so let's advance. I like the picture here. Don't bow down to the Hamans of this world. Because in every generation, there's always those people who want to do bad things. Haman, the Amalekites, Hitler, Mussolini. Every generation has those. But then there's a time that we don't bow. Remember what happened in the story of Esther. Mordecai got mad, or Mordecai would not bow down to Haman. And Haman got all upset because you wouldn't bow down. Nope. Won't do it. Stood his ground. Don't let what is proper or popular numb you to the biblical principles that should drive you. I think that's very important today, as we're seeing certain values being eroded. We got a choice. Do we speak out or be quiet? I like what Mordecai told Esther. Because when he tells Esther, you need to go talk to the king right now, she didn't really want to do it because, well, if you're not invited by the king and you go to the king, you can lose your head. So she had a lot of trepidation about doing it. But he makes a very curious statement. He said, if you don't do it, the Jewish people will be rescued by someone else, and you and your father's house will perish. In other words, if you don't do it, somebody else will. Somebody else will. I don't want to be that one that has to stand before God and go explain to him why I didn't do it. So, yeah, me, I'm always in trouble. It's just the degree in which of trouble I get into. It's like I always behave. People tell me behave. I always behave. What does that word behave mean? It means to act in a particular manner. I always act in a particular manner. Sometimes it's well, sometimes it's ornery, sometimes it's bad, but I always behave. They just didn't qualify which type of behavior. They just said behave. I always behave. Advance. And I love this one especially. Seek wisdom in troubled times. Let's go back to the story with Esther. We're facing a Holocaust. The Jews are going to be annihilated in 127 provinces. She is charged by Mordecai to go talk to the king. She doesn't go talk to the king immediately. She asks that the Jewish people fast and pray for 3 days for her. She too fasts and prays. And I'm sure during that time of prayer, she's asking not only for God to give her strength and encouragement, courage, but wisdom. And if you're familiar with this story, I want you to look at what happens in it. When she does come before the king sees her, grins at her, lifts his scepter up, tells her, come in, I'll give you anything you want, up to 50% of my kingdom. Now, wouldn't this be the right time to say, okay, hey, king, look, there's this guy that wants to kill us all, and all I need, if just a little favor, just sign your name to this deal here to cancel that, and everything would be cool. Wouldn't that have been the easy thing to do? You would think that would be the logical thing to do. But Haman was the king's closest advisor. She realizes that if she just comes up to the king and tells the king, hey, Haman's trying to kill us all, will you sign this piece of paper and get rid of him? Him being his closest advisor, she might be the one that might lose her head. So what does she do? She tells the king, if I found favor in your eyes, then I want you and Haman to come to a party, this banquet that I'm having for him. Who's him? She invited 2 guys to this party. Which one is the him? And if you're the king, neither one of them's good. Because if you're the king and the king is him, he may be expecting this nice romantic time with Queen Esther. Why are you inviting Haman? That's a buzzkill. But then if it's for Haman, he's going to be wondering, why are you throwing a banquet for Haman? What has she done? She has now placed into the king's mind a little seed. He starts getting jealous. Is there some hanky-panky going on? What's this deal with this? So they come to the party. And once again he says, what do you want, Esther? I'll give you anything you want, up to half my kingdom. She says, well, if I have found favor with you, I want you and Haman to come back for another banquet tomorrow night that I'm throwing for them. Notice the change in pronouns. Who's them? Because it doesn't matter who him was, now it's changed to them. King can't sleep. That night the king cannot sleep. He orders that the king's records brought out. Haman's all excited. He wants to get rid of Mordecai. He's getting ready to go to the king to ask permission to hang him. The king can't sleep. He gets the records. And it just so happens that the book opens to the exact place where it's recorded how Mordecai rescued the king. And the king realizes, ooh, I never did reward him for it. This is right before Haman comes in. Again, not a good time. That evening, or that next evening, what happens? They go to the party. At the party, he says to Esther one more time, what do you want, Esther? I'll give you up to half of my kingdom. She said, if I've found favor with you, spare my life and the life of my people. Because an evil person has come and they've kidnapped us and they want to kill us all. The king now is all upset. Who did such a thing? She looks over. That evil man, Haman. Boo. What happens now? Remember that little seed? It's planted. Now it's like, now he's wanting to take her away from him. He gets all perturbed. He runs out. He goes out to the garden, gets some fresh air. Haman is freaking out because now he realizes, oh, this may not go too good for him. So he goes to Esther and he starts begging Esther for some leniency. And guess who walks in? Here comes the king. Haman is sitting on Esther's couch where Esther is. The king sees this. Oh, so what? You're going to attack my wife in my own home? One of the advisors says, hey, Haman made these gallows to kill Mordecai. And what does the king say? Hang him. Hang Haman. We got rid of Haman. But do you notice her strategy? And where did that come from? She asked for wisdom on how to handle that situation. Seeking wisdom in this troubled time. So when we find ourselves in a difficult position, what do we need to do? We need to ask God how to handle this situation. Even this difficult situation. We'll end it now with talking about wisdom from an ancient scroll. There's a lot of information here. There's so many things that happen in this scroll. I don't have time to tell you. And of course, some of it is a little bit more technical. But it's a wonderful story. If you've never read the story, go home, open your Bible, read the book of Esther. It's only 10 chapters long. It's not a very big chapter. Chapter 9, though, there are some strange things that happen, especially in Hebrew. But a lot of people ask me, what can they do for Israel? If you have something to write with, I want you to write down this email address. It's called Lev, that's L-E-V, Haolam, HAOLAM.com, all one word, levhaolam.com. It means the heart of the world. It is an organization in Israel that was created to combat the BDS movement, boycott, divest, and sanction. These are Jewish businesses that now I think there's like over 100 different deals. And what they do is you send them, I think, $99 a month, and they will send you then out a box of anywhere from 7 to 9 products that come from some of these Jewish businesses. My wife will tell you, ladies, that the face cream, that the cosmetic stuff is top notch. Now, you pay $99 for it, but my wife went online to buy another canister off one of the deals that she really liked. That one thing was $75 by itself. So you get way more. But it's a way to help Israel. And right now, Israel is hurting during this pandemic. And one of the letters I got from them, they said, "Thank you. You are our heroes." This is the only income that we're getting right now during this pandemic. If you want to help Israel, go to that website. My wife and I have been doing it for a long time, and I tell you, I truly believe that that's one of the reasons that God has blessed us even through this time of pandemic. It's because we have helped Israel. So with that, thank you very much for allowing me to come. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your prayer. And thank you for allowing me to share. Shalom.